African comic guy. Welcome back to part two of the state of DC. Let's get to it. And you guessed it, after the movie came out, the fan base voiced its displeasure, anger, frustration, because we were like, dude, you lied to us. All this hype for this. This is not what we expected. Because again, watching Man of Steel, Batman vs. Superman, Wonder Woman, we're seeing where this DCEU is going. But clearly, this Justice League, because I refuse to call it Justice League, this is Justice League, was garbage. And the fan base just basically lost it. And Twitter and Facebook, and I mean, people just went, what the, And I remember people trying to reach, people, everybody kept, because Zach was quiet. Again, mind you, he's going through this tragedy. And I don't know if he had signed like a gag order or something where he wasn't really communicating or wasn't allowed to communicate. So he didn't tell, because if he had said, this is not my movie, then, this movie would have made nothing. Because you got to understand, at that point, even if you think about Marvel, Marvel was building, right? You could tell these stories were connected. So the fan base was connected. Now imagine somebody coming in, imagine Marvel just deciding, we're going to switch it. You're cheating the fan base, because now you've set expectations. We're following these movies, we're following these stories, we expect certain things, and then all of a sudden you're under us. So, as expected, the fan base was pissed, and they were going to be pissed even more, because soon enough things started leaking. The fact that Zack Snyder had finished his movie started leaking. The fact that there was a Zack Snyder version of the movie leaked. It created a firestorm. Like, you telling me that you spent money, months, whatever, and you did the movie we wanted to see. You decided to do another movie, and this movie was actually in post-production, and this is what you gave us? And you lied to us? Oh yeah, you're about to hear from us. And they did. And when I tell you, restore the Snyderverse came on, this fan base, I don't think there's ever been a more intense, more passionate, more, I don't even know how many adjectives I could use here to describe the Zack Snyder fan base, because people went mad, and this trended globally. Millions of people were joining in #restore this. I mean, people right now were pissed off at Warner Brothers, because Warner Brothers were trying to do something, right? They were trying to make DC Marvel. Now, if you know anything about these movies, these Marvel movies their storytelling is different. There's a lot of humor, but it kind of fits, right? Because they started it from the beginning. So it kind of fits in their storytelling. There's certain aspects of their dialogue that fits, certain aspects of their fighting, and that fits. But DC had their own version, and we expected a different version, the DCEU. But here comes Warner Brothers, who feel, you know what, we're going to make money if we change the story and do it like this. And unfortunately, they didn't. Because again, your audience are the fans. The fans told you the truth. This was absolute garbage. And the movie didn't make as much money as they thought they would, which you would think would clearly tell them, well, we have something that works. Let's keep what works. But not these people, but not this studio. yeah, we're basically going to can the DCE. We're actually going to intervene and interrupt and basically destroy the DCEU. And they did. Now, Warner Brothers decided to stick to their guns. They were not going to budge. But soon after this debacle, basically, they had a couple of success movies. You had Aquaman, 2019, that made over $1 billion. And again, like I said, I've said it once and I'll say it again. Good writing, good directing, good casting. Aquaman had all three. And that movie was extremely well done, and the entire world fell in love with his movie. Jason Momoa playing Aquaman. I mean, it fit. You see him, you see Aquaman, and the way he did it, again, really, really badass. With characters that I'd loved watching in DC. Black Manta, who I just spoke about recently, Orm, his brother, you know, it was really, that movie was outstanding. Soon after Shazam, which was actually critically acclaimed. This was a movie that, again, didn't really make a lot of money, just shy under 400 million. But this movie I think it really captured the hearts and minds of kids, because I don't think as a lot of adults loved, because again, we're so used to being badass, and he wasn't really badass. This was a movie. This was a fun family movie. Still a DCEU movie, because they referenced certain characters, and you could see that it was meant to be that way. So as financially didn't do a lot, but critically people loved it. So coming after, we knew those two movies obviously would have sequels, because they did well, not only financially, but incredibly, really, really, really good reviews. Now, in the 2020s came some other hits and misses. And one of them that I can speak for myself, I was incredibly looking forward to, especially after not only seeing the cast, but also knowing the director, seeing the trailer, the Suicide Squad. I mean, it was the first time we were actually going to get this in the movies. I mean, it was mind blowing, because if you followed DC, especially DC animation, you've seen the Suicide Squad for so long, right? And Justice League Unlimited, and Young Justice. Like, you've seen them in DC animation. Because, just as a side mention, throughout this entire 2000s, DC has come out with some of the best DC animated content ever. DC animation wins all the time. Like, I don't think they've ever had one movie where you were like, no, DC animation is outstanding. But yeah, when they announced it at Comic Con that they were going to be doing Suicide Squad, I was like, okay. And then I remember seeing the trailer and I'm like, okay. And then the movie came out. The first day I was there, I watched this movie. The movie ends. And I'm like, this movie is absolute garbage. Absolute trash. Not the acting. Well, the acting was good, especially Margot Robbie, who best cast as Harley Quinn. But the story sucked. The directing was okay, but the story sucked. It did. And because of that, again, all three need to align for a movie to do well. This movie had great casting, but unfortunately, the story. And then we learn after the movie comes out that Warner Brothers actually interfered in the movie. That David Ayer, the director of Suicide Squad, actually was directing it this way, but was told to do Warner Brothers. And now we know there's an actual finished version. There's David Ayer's version of Suicide Squad. We know that there is. They know we know that there is. So think of how angry you are Think of the hype. This movie had so much hype. I think the trailer alone had over 90 million views. This is before the movie came out. And we got garbage. And then we learned that the movie we thought we were getting is out there. See what a studio that is, that had wins, that had the recipe for success. They decide to go against it and come up with excuses as to why these movies don't do well, when we all know clearly the fan base tells you this is what you had. You hit gold, but you decided, because you were greedy and because you were envious of another studio that was doing very well, not realizing that they're following their storyline. They haven't changed. They're following their arc and being, because the fans react. Fans fall in love with these stories because, hey, this is where you're leading us here. It's working. You decide as Warner Brothers, yeah, we're going to do what they do. And your fan base clearly tells you, but at least we got Harley Quinn, Margot Robbie, from that movie, because she clearly is Harley Quinn and she plays that role very well. So at least there was silver lining. Soon after came Wonder Woman 1984. And man, I remember, my family will tell you, I think it was either Christmas or a week before Christmas, a few days before Christmas 2020, I got them all together. This movie, because of the pandemic, actually came out online on HBO Max. Max now. I paid. I didn't have HBO Max. I paid. And I sat my family down and I was like, we're about to watch. Because, again, hype. Wonder Woman was going to be fighting Cheetah. So Cheetah was going to appear in film for the first time. And I remember the trailers seeing Cheetah, and I'm like, oh, this movie is about to be good. Coming from Wonder Woman previously, which was basically a hit. This movie, if anything could fall off as bad as this movie fell off, I remember watching the first 9 minutes, which is the only good thing about this movie. The first 9 minutes where Diana is a child, they're in Themyscira, and I'm like, oh, we're back to that Wonder Woman. This is about to be good. And then from that moment on till the end of that movie, I remember during the movie people texting. Now this is a movie that is just launching, just coming out that day. It's Wonder Woman. And that movie was hot garbage. And it's so sad to say that because it's Gal Gadot and she portrays Wonder Woman very well. But this movie fell short because it had good casting, but it had horrible storytelling. And I'm sorry to say, Patty Jenkins, it had really bad directing. And I don't understand why this movie went so far out of the previous movie. It is such a disappointment because they had an opportunity to do something incredible. The first time we see Cheetah on film, it's so sad to say, but again, this was garbage. It really was, and the fan base didn't lie, because if that movie came out in the theaters, I think they said this movie made just under 200 million. First Wonder Woman made just shy under 800 million. But something good was on the horizon. Again, remember I mentioned before that we knew that Zack Snyder had finished his movie. And this entire time, Warner Brothers was denying it, was using excuses, was trying to quarrel, or trying to quell these rumors. And then Zack started leaking aspects of that movie, and then we're like, we know this movie is out there. We know it. I don't care what you say. We know it. He was given the green light to finish his movie. Because when this movie came out in March of 2021, it was a hit. When I tell you HBO Max servers were trying to keep up with the demand of people tuning in to watch this movie. Mind you, this movie is 4 hours long. Warner Brothers claiming that this movie was similar to that travesty that came out in 2017 that was 2 hours long. Zack's movie was 4 hours long. I remember watching this movie going, this basically every scene, every scene that was good in the original Justice League was Zack's. That is the craziest thing. If you ask anybody who watched that previous movie and watched Zack's movie, every good scene that was in that previous travesty was Zack's movie. Think about that as a director. This man is so bad that he has to incorporate somebody else's stuff to make his movie look good. And it didn't. This movie basically destroyed that movie that came out before. In every aspect, when I tell you from top to bottom, it destroyed that movie. The acting, directing, the cast was the same cast, the outstanding cast, but everything, fighting. I remember we're seeing fighting scenes. We're like, yes, we're back to the DCEU. I mean, it was outstanding. I mean, Steppenwolf, seeing Darkseid. And then the story made sense. I remember seeing Cyborg, and Cyborg in this movie actually has a story, right? It allows us to connect with this man. Like, there was actually a story. The Flash actually had a story. Aquaman actually had a story. We were there, we connected. You're like, everybody looked good. The movie looked good. And mind you, this is a 4-hour movie, and Zack decided to kind of split it into sections, even though I watched the entire movie from start to finish. I don't think I got up. I don't think I paused it. I don't think I got up I didn't pause it. That movie came out, and I think I watched it 5 days in a row because I couldn't believe it. I could not believe this movie. And I know, and I believe in everything in me. If this movie would have come out when it was supposed to, this movie would have made over $1 billion. And any other fan will tell you. Because that other movie made shy under, what, 700 million? Think about it. That horrible movie made over 700 million. What do you think this movie would have done? First time we get to see Darkseid. The first time we see Steppenwolf and CGI. Like, if there's one thing you appreciate about Zack is his attention to detail. I mean, you watch Steppenwolf and you honestly tend to believe this man or this creature is not CGI. That's how good of a job they do, and they did. And yet this stupid studio decided to keep this from us, and they suffered for it. You need to allow this man to finish his masterpiece. And when I tell you, fans will run to the theater to watch these movies, you have no idea. Hashtag restore the Snyderverse. Now, soon after followed movies that failed incredibly miserably. One of the movies was Black Adam. Black Adam. I truly believe The Rock was the right cast, or the right person to play Black Adam. I mean, he looks like Black Adam, right? But unfortunately, it failed in every every other aspect. I remember the hype again. You go off of hype. I remember the year before at Comic Con online, we were getting a scene, and we're like going back to the DCEU where he is going to be badass. Now, if you know anything about Black Adam, even in the comics, he is very, very violent. He is unforgiving. He is vicious. He is not afraid to kill. He is not afraid to do whatever he has to do to win. And we're like, it looks like this is what we're going to have. So we were already hyped up for this movie. I remember the trailer coming out. We're already hyped up for this movie. And I remember just watching this, and I've watched that movie once. I honestly cannot watch it again because you failed us. Warner Brothers failed us again. There are other elements that worked. Before I fully destroy this movie, there are certain parts of this movie that worked. The characters that played the Justice Society of America. So you had Pierce Brosnan playing Dr. Fate. Outstanding cast. He honestly needs his own movie. HBO Max, I don't know, Netflix, he was outstanding. Hawkman was outstanding. And that movie made shy under 400 million for a movie that everybody thought would restore the DCEU. Again, like I say it all the time, you cannot overcome certain shortcomings. Soon after that came Shazam, Fury of the Gods. Soon after The Flash came out, after so much hype, we heard so much hype about it, right? Online, everybody's liking it. I remember seeing Tom Cruise liked it. I'm like, this movie is about to be. I remember texting my friend before I watched that movie that this movie is going to make $1 billion because of the hype. I remember being in a theater and the theater was packed. There were talks that if this movie did what they were supposed to do and did extremely well, maybe there was a chance to restore the DCEU. When I tell you that probably 30, 45 minutes into this movie, mentally tuned out, because this was not the movie you told us was. Like, they got it right with casting Ezra Miller as the Flash, because if you watched Justice League, Zack Snyder's Justice League, he was outstanding. But it's a totally different character, a totally different way that he's portrayed in the new Flash movie. And as predictable as this is, even when you have Michael Keaton revising his role as Batman, I don't think I've been that disappointed in a movie that had so much hype, that had us all excited. You know, let me tell you, when movies make $1 billion, you know what happens? Is I go watch this movie. I can't believe how good it is. I call my friend. I'm like, you gotta watch this movie, and I'll watch it with you. We both go again. Like, it's this revolving door because we cannot believe how good this movie is. There was a win that I didn't mention before. The Batman. Good director. So good directing. Good story. Good cast. This movie made over 700 million. Clear win. And I know there are sequels coming. I just hope Warner Brothers don't you dare touch this movie. You better let this man direct this movie the way he wants. I don't care how he wants to, but you have to go back to what works. Now, people, I keep mentioning Zack Snyder. Now, I don't mention him, and I love how he directs. I love how his movies look. I love how meticulous and how passionate he is about comics, especially DC Comics. But the reason people love him is because he puts out outstanding content, storytelling. He does not cheat us when it comes to storytelling. And I really believe if Warner Brothers allows really these storytellers, the David Ayers of the world, the Patty Jenkins of the world, right? The Matt Reeves of the world, if you allow them to tell the stories the way they want to tell the stories, you will actually find you'll actually find out that they will put out outstanding content. And Matt Reeves just showed you that, right? Here's a director who hadn't done any DC movies prior to that, who came on board. And I bet you when he came on board to direct The Batman in 2022, I bet you he told them, I'm doing it my way. And they stepped aside. And that movie actually made just shy under 800 million. All we can be is hopeful that they basically go back to the drawing board and they hire incredible writers. They work with directors who actually know where DC is supposed to go. DC is supposed to be, I like the fact that DC is dark. When people say DC is dark, DC is dark. That works. It does not work for everybody, but it works for the majority of DC fans. We like our heroes being badass. Bad ass. Okay? Like, I don't want to see Wonder Woman slap a human being and that person just falls. No, but Wonder Woman is basically a god. If she hits you, you're flying across the room. Now that's realism. That's DC. So Warner Brothers, if you're listening, stay the hell away from DC. Stay the hell away from DC. Allow James Gunn to really write the stories we want to see. We want DC back to its prominence. For DC to get back to its prominence, you got to do a few things. Number one, bring Zack back. Allow him to finish his masterpiece. Second thing, like I mentioned before, writers, you have to bring really, really good writers. We have a really good VFX team. Thirdly, Warner Brothers, stay the hell away out of DC. Fourth, James Gunn running DC. You basically right now have the library. You have so much content, so much DC content, so much to pull from. How about you tell us some new stories? How about you tell us stories? How about you take a risk and tell us stories we haven't seen? Watchmen. Great movie. Did well. The Joker a few years ago that made over $1 billion that I didn't mention. That director took a risk. $50 million movie, budget-wise, made over $1 billion because the right director, right? The right director came on board, told his story, basically an origin version of the Joker, and this movie made $1 billion. How about James Gunn? Take a risk. Tell stories that we know you can tell, that you know you can find directors and writers to tell. And I promise you, as a fan base, we will come running and we will consume this content. You know it works. Just follow these simple rules, and I promise you, you will get to the promised land. I choose to believe that DC's best days are not behind. DC's best days are ahead, but it takes somebody who decides, like you being the steward for DC right now, it takes you doing your absolute best to tell good stories, to have good casting and good directors. And I promise you, DC will go back to what DC is. Well, with that, my friends, as always, I loved actually talking about the state of DC because I am extremely passionate about DC. I love DC content. I have consumed DC content my entire life. I love all comics. I love Marvel. but I've always been partial to DC because my introduction to comics growing up, majority of it was DC. I fell in love with Batman and Superman. I fell in love with watching the Joker basically terrorize Gotham. I love these stories. So, like most DC fans, I want DC to do well because I'm sick and tired of watching stuff and you're like, I'm sick and tired of being so excited and being hyped to watch something and then leaving the theater going, dude, I wasted my money. I just spent, do you know how much popcorn and soda cost? But like I mentioned before, I am extremely hopeful. So I can't wait. So anyway, like always, it's been a blast sharing this information with you. Hopefully, you have an understanding if you're a DC fan where DC is, where DC's come from. Hopefully, where DC's been and where DC is going to go. And again, like if this content is entertaining, is informative, is exciting to you, consider subscribing, consider supporting this channel. And as we grow and have really awesome conversations over the future, I can't wait to interact, in the future. And I can't wait to see where DC goes. Again, it's been the African Comic Guy signing off. Peace.